Sarah Goodridge was one of the finest miniature painters in the United States during the first half of the 19th century, an era in which the miniature was a very popular art form. She was essentially self-taught, although she did receive tuition from the portraitist Gilbert Stuart. She became a successful full-time professional artist and, remaining unmarried herself, acted as the main economic support to her family. Goodridge was one of the best-known New England miniaturists of her era, and was very popular and very prolific, with many examples of her work still to be found in private and public collections today. She painted this self-portrait miniature, one of several known self-portraits, in 1830. It shows her as strong-featured, with a direct and searching gaze. Under 10 centimeters in height, this work displays her complete mastery of the difficult technique of miniature painting in watercolor on ivory. It is an exquisite and beautiful work of art, but it is also conventional. It offers no surprises. But this painting, by the same artist, is a surprise. This is also a miniature, about 7 centimeters high by 8 centimeters wide, also in watercolor on ivory, also exquisite and beautiful, but far from conventional. Sarah Goodridge painted this in 1828 as a gift for the prominent lawyer, politician, and Massachusetts Senator Daniel Webster, who was a close friend. Exactly how close is a matter for speculation. Its title is Beauty Revealed. There is nothing else quite like it in 19th century American art. The art historian and curator Dr. Robin Jaffee Frank has written that this image offers an unparalleled view into the miniaturist's inner life as a woman and an artist. In an age still shy about painting the nude, Goodridge painted a private part of her own body, unclothed in moral or religious interpretation. Surely, as an artist and a woman, she appreciated the potency of her imagery. It still surprises viewers today. Beauty Revealed first broke into public consciousness in the early 1990s, when it was included in an exhibition of American portrait miniatures at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. In 1993, the American writer John Updike wrote an essay reflecting on his encounter with this work of art, in which he described the ethereal qualities of these disembodied breasts, their glowing paleness, their possession both of softness and, paradoxically, the symmetry of armor. He also noted of Goodridge's work that the living model is presumed to have been herself, though this grants young and perfect breasts to a woman who, in 1828, became 40 years old, a remark that perhaps says more about John Updike than it does about this painting. Beauty Revealed was preserved by the Webster family, along with Goodridge's easel and paintbox, for over 150 years, before being acquired by a private collector in the 1980s, who donated it to the Metropolitan Museum in 2006. Any original documentation that accompanied the work has been lost, but the date of 1828, the attribution to Goodridge, and the work's title are all reliably recorded. That Goodridge was very close to Daniel Webster is also part of Webster family tradition. In the family, they used to refer to her, apparently, as his fiancée. There is little room for doubt that Beauty Revealed is a self-portrait, that the model was indeed the artist herself. What other woman's breasts would she have painted, particularly in order to send the resulting picture to Webster? So, in fact, these breasts, while abstracted from their owner, do not, in John Updike's phrase, float ownerless. This, then, is a self-portrait, which shows not the artist's face or head and shoulders, but only her naked upper chest, depicted in delicate detail, with the luminosity of the ivory glowing through the fine shading and stippling, isolated from the rest of her body, and wrapped, like jewelry or some other delicate and very precious thing, in painted folds of silk. The present hinged case is probably not original, but there would always have been a case of some kind, with a padded interior, to protect the fragile sheet of ivory. Thus the artist's breasts, unclothed as they are, have also been twice wrapped, in painted and in physical padding, protected from the gaze of the world, from the gaze of all, except the person for whom this intimate portrait was intended. As Updike's reference to paradoxical armor suggests, there is a simultaneous inviting softness and defensive hardness in this picture, as if the body is sculpted, an impression strengthened by the pale coloration and the strong three-dimensionality of the modelling. For all the delicate intimacy inherent to the painted miniature as a form, this image seems to possess the idealized remoteness of classical sculpture, a form in which the nude body is removed from the realm of lustful desires and passions and elevated into a realm of aesthetic purity and ideal beauty. In an age in which sculpture in the classical tradition was a high-status form in American art, and one in which the nude was more acceptable than was the case in contemporary painting, these were powerful associations. But there is a tension in this image, a tension between idealization and specificity, because this remains an image of a specific individual's body. It is a self-portrait. These are Sarah Goodridge's own breasts, uniquely hers, revealed through her unique artistic gaze. To describe Beauty Revealed as a self-portrait may seem to be stretching the meaning of the term, but it is hard to know what else to call it. Self-portraits sometimes depict the whole body, but where they show only one part of the body, that part is the face. Indeed, the face would, in traditional terms at least, seem to be the irreducible element of any portrait. The face is synonymous with the person. The representation of the individual's face in a portrait, in a way that presents that individual recognizably, is the basis of portraiture, whether the portrait is produced by oneself or by another. Here the artist has painted herself, a detailed and careful piece of self-depiction, but she has painted not her face, but another part of her body. There is no doubt a degree of idealization in her depiction, but she also reproduces physical idiosyncrasies, blemishes, asymmetries, qualities of volume and shape that would enable this part of her body, for someone familiar with it at least, to be as recognizably hers as her face. Thus the apparent anonymity is a disguise, a shield against the unfamiliar onlooker, against the world, like the padded lid that closes over the image. There was, in the early 19th century, a fashionable genre of miniature portrait painting, although one more associated with Europe than America, that abstracted one element from the subject's body and created an image that was simultaneously an individual portrait, but anonymous and safe to display in public. This was the eye miniature, often incorporated into brooches, lockets, and other forms of personal jewelry. These images intensified the already powerful emotional charge of the miniature portrait and appealed strongly to contemporary romantic sensibilities. Dr. Laura Forsberg, in her 2021 book Worlds Beyond, Miniatures and Victorian Fiction, has called these eye miniatures poetic renderings of love itself, as much as they are specific representations of a beloved. The title of Sarah Goodridge's painting, Beauty Revealed, bestowed as far as we know by herself, suggests a similar motive at work in this image, an invocation of a more generalized and poetic quality of beauty, as well as of the particular physical characteristics of a specific individual, in this case herself. There are works of art which, like the eye miniatures, represent particular parts of the body abstracted from the whole, notably depictions of the hands of specific individuals. But eyes and hands are not private parts of the body. They are normally visible, accepted aspects of a person's public persona. the same is not true, at least in Western society, of the female breast. And a painting of an eye or a sculpture of a hand is typically created by an artist for a client. Sarah Goodridge painted her breasts for her own eyes and for the eyes of one other person, and she did this at a time when respectable women, in art and in reality, remained covered up, and when nudes of any kind were problematic for female artists, including nude self-portraits. And she does not show the whole of herself, but one part that stands for the whole. Had Sarah Goodridge been married, she might have painted such a picture for her husband, but she never married. Had she painted this picture simply for herself, as a private piece destined to be seen by no eyes but her own, we might suggest various motivations, perhaps an artistic exercise, a matter of practicing her skills and meeting the challenge of an unusual subject, but a subject she needed to go no further than her own person to find. Perhaps it was a gesture towards painting the female nude, something not accessible to women artists until much later in the 19th century, except in the form of their own bodies. But, as we have heard, she did not paint this picture for herself. She painted it for Daniel Webster, a man whose portrait she painted many times, corresponded with frequently, met when it was possible to do so, and was clearly close to. We don't know exactly when Sarah Goodridge and Daniel Webster became acquainted, but they were already close by the late 1820s, when Webster suffered two tragedies, the death of his wife Grace in 1828 and of his older brother Ezekiel in 1829. Sarah Goodridge's companionship was clearly important to him at this time. Webster's biographer Robert Remini writes of a strong emotional bond which the two shared, and it seems that, at least on Goodridge's part, that bond strengthened and deepened during this period of grief and emotional turbulence. What did Sarah Goodridge mean when she painted this picture and sent it to the newly widowed and doubly grieving Webster? A message of affection, love, devotion, but is it more? A reminder of intimacy in the past, an appeal for intimacy in the future, an offering of herself, even a proposal? If so, it was unsuccessful. Webster did not marry Sarah Goodridge, but married instead Caroline Leroy, who was from a wealthy and well-connected mercantile family. Leroy made a very suitable wife for an ambitious politician, and the union was a successful one, although it is notable that the new Mrs. Webster remains suspicious of Goodridge and her apparent bond with her husband. But is this image simply a matter, as it is sometimes represented, of Sarah Goodridge offering herself, body and soul, to the man she loved, or are other layers of meaning present? The female breast makes for a powerful symbol, full of meaning. Maternal and nurturing, erotic and sensual, the breast also encloses the heart and is regarded as the abode of deep feeling and emotion. In offering her breasts, is Sarah Goodridge simply offering her heart? But why choose this way, when there are many visual means by which she could have sent this message, while avoiding the ambiguities and dangers inherent in an exposure of her breasts? The American political thinker and feminist Iris Marion Young wrote in her 2005 book On Female Body Experience about the complexities of what she called breasted experience. The chest, the house of the heart, is an important center of a person's being. I may locate my consciousness in my head, but myself, my existence as a solid person in the world, starts from my chest, from which I feel myself rise and radiate. If the chest is the center of a person's sense of being in the world and identity, men and women have quite different experiences of being in the world. When a woman places her hand over her heart, it lies on and between her breasts. If her chest is the house of her being, from which radiates her energy to meet the world, her breasts are also entwined with her sense of herself. For many women, if not all, breasts are an important part of body self-image. A woman may love them or dislike them, but she is rarely neutral. There is a temptation to read Goodridge's painting and the interpersonal dynamic underlying it solely from the point of view of the recipient. What point was she trying to make to Daniel Webster? What response was she trying to provoke from him? In other words, a male-centered interpretation. But if instead we place the picture in a female-centered context, informed by Jung's analysis of the breasts as a seat of uniquely female power, identity, and agency, a very different analysis suggests itself, one that sees this painting in terms of self-assertive womanhood and the summoning up of female power. In her 1994 book, Mixed Messages, Our Breasts in Our Lives, Bridget McConville invoked the female-centered power of the breast in ancient literature and myth as a corrective to the male-centered objectification of breasts in much of modern visual culture. In these stories, the breast symbolizes motherhood and love. These are precious necessities without which the human race could not survive. But it also suggests sex and female power, forces which men have long feared. Perhaps Sarah Goodridge painted herself in this way, not just for the eyes of Daniel Webster, but for herself, not as a plea or a strategy of seduction, but as an assertive display of her agency and identity as a woman, and as a gesture of female defiance towards a society that demanded propriety and respectability, and was always ready to condemn women for the supposedly characteristically female sin of vanity. This female-centered reading also respects the character of the work itself. It reflects the fact that Beauty Revealed was never intended to be viewed as a public piece of art. It is profoundly private, and it is profoundly subjective, expressive of pride as well as passion, conveying the painter's feelings about herself, as well as her self-presentation to another. As the historian of religion Professor Margaret R. Miles has written, as long as breasts are objectified, every society will consider some breasts beautiful and others ugly. But the breast, perceived as a subject and symbol of a woman's life and experience, is always beautiful, to her own eye and to the other's loving eye.